All right, this is your May Day alert. May Day alert. We are in the danger zone. All right, notice how the freedom is checked. Officially, everybody is now free. Or oddly enough, this Operation Freedom has changed to Operation Liberty. I don't know if that was a misreporting or just a change in names. But there is no freedom, obviously, not even in this country. Now it's under liberty. And the interesting thing I'd point out about freedom is the only real true free people are the illegal immigrants. They have no documents. They drive here without a license. They don't register. And neither party knows how to approach the whole situation. But essentially, they are truly the free people here. So we should keep that in mind. There is no other free individual in this country besides the illegal immigrants. Okay, Avengers Endgame is what's distracting us today. Interestingly enough, we are actually going back to the future. And I'm going to say this with regards to the Bose-Einstein condensate. And it's interesting that if you actually go into Back to the Future, the movie, you have Einstein in a car. He reappears later after this specific clip after reaching 88 miles per hour, which I think is some sort of cue. Now, you got to understand, after knowing the information that we know this year, we're very aware that the CIA is still a part of the movie industry. Now, the government was always a part of the movie industry early on, and it's interesting that a lot of their nitrate films got completely burned. You know, it could happen. Nitrate's highly flammable.
Einstein has just become the world's first time traveler.
So you see, Einstein was the first time traveler. That's what they just told us. But nonetheless, the government was a part of those films then too. They were always trying to direct the public to what to think. And it's why we kind of had a lot of the social problems we have now. Maybe they're redirecting us in a different direction. They don't care about their own operations back in 1905. But nonetheless, they are there. They're amongst the films, and I'm going to show you what I think is going on. But I'm going to just show you the similarities.
Time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
Of course, this is just for fun, and obviously Back to the Future didn't explain the multidimensionality of time travel, but it would have been there.
In 1984 and following, the current thinking in physics is what they call superstrings, one-dimensional strings that vibrate in 10 dimensions. Now, to you and I, that doesn't make much sense, but I'll tell you what's interesting, is that if you go back and study the writings of Nachmanides, he's one of the two most venerated Hebrew sages of the 12th century, or actually 13th century. He concluded by studying Genesis chapter 1 that we live in 10 dimensions. 4 of them are directly knowable and 6 are not, according to his. He published this in his commentary on Genesis. And I find this fascinating because you and I live in a culture where we've spent millions of dollars building atomic accelerators to discover that we live in 10 dimensions. 4 are directly measurable, 3 spatial plus time, and the 6 are not directly accessible because they're smaller than the wavelength of light. So they're only inferable by indirect means, but well confirmed, it seems. Now, as we go into the scripture, I have to share this with you. In Ephesians chapter 3, Paul writes, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth and length and depth and height, and to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge, that ye might be filled with all the fullness of God. Most of us read that in Ephesians chapter 3. We may miss something subtle here. You notice what he said? Paul says the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height. How many are there? 4 dimensions. And one of the Greek word for length is a measurement of time, by the way. So I think that's fascinating. Did Paul really know we live in a 4-dimensional space?
Nonetheless, if you look at the Bible, it might also be why the Bible never describes any clear prediction. And it might be why so many people tried to kill certain individual youth, such as Moses and Jesus, and they couldn't find them. And it's actually probably why there's just the Bible, because at some point in time things were linear in some aspect, and after a certain point maybe things got a little less linear, which actually scares me, because when I start to see things like new treaties that we had, then we canceled, then we had again, you almost start to see where time could actually branch. It could explode into new different possibilities that wouldn't have existed unless the treaties were intentionally broken. And maybe they weren't broken just so that they could actually go into nuclear war. Maybe they're broken to generate different timelines and essentially keep their control. The powers to be to keep their control over the people. And we might actually think, oh, here it is, imminent danger, they're going to fight each other again. When in fact, they might just be taking off the safety switch, generate different timelines, and picking which one they want to go through. Now, how they would go about that, I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure the computational power would be available now for them to decide this, and it may have been available then, given the fact that the Bose-Einstein condensate has been around for a very long time. I'd say 70-year-old technology that we're actually seeing IBM use in present day. So my final point actually returns us back to the future. Back in 1955, the Quartermass experiment debuted as a sci-fi thriller. An astronaut returns to Earth after an experimental space flight afflicted by a strange fungus that transforms him into a murderous monster, after bullets and bombs fail to stop the creature. Now, the amphibian apocalypse has been known since the 1950s, with radiation being a factor in weakening frogs' immunity. So the dates that keep on emerging seem to be 1955, 1958, and, well, generally the 80s, 1986, 1985, 1987, 1988, and sometimes even 1989 with regards to information that was discovered in 85 or 84. A curious earthquake that happened in El Salvador in 1986, October 10th, is interestingly enough 1 whole year, almost exactly, to the Black Monday event in 1987, October 19th, in which the stock markets crashed shortly after the Hong Kong stock markets crashed. Fast forward May 2018, El Salvador earthquake had a series of seismic events, 733 total, occurred between May 5th and May 9th. As reported by the National Seismic Network, the epicenter was an area located between the municipalities and had 95 of these earthquakes, whose magnitude ranges between 2.4 and 5.6, that were felt by the population, the strongest of 5.6. Obviously associating the past with the present and thinking a market crash is going to happen because of the past Earth events, and a lot of the similarities, is kind of far-fetched. So I would go further into suggesting that we look just for a second at the Keeling curve. It's at its highest peak, and right now it should be declining. The fact is, the Keeling curve is going to have a problem getting a rebound just because of the crop failures that we're having and the lack of vegetation that's supposed to be in the ground and blooming right now, decreasing the CO2 levels. Nonetheless, it will rebound, but it will not rebound in the levels it was the prior year, and it is going to continue to make and break records the following year. So we're going to see what happens here with the crops, and we're going to see what happens here with the stocks. And this is going to conclude my Mayday alert. Stay awake, stay aware. Regarding the data, we are in territory that we have never been in before in history.